Today we are going to do the super exciting step of inking our styrofoam stamps and printing them onto another piece of paper. So for the first step, you're going to need your styrofoam stamp. You're going to need the practice paper, and that's just paper that somebody else probably has drawn on and decided they didn't need or didn't want to use. So that's a good place for us to do our inking, to make sure that none of the ink gets onto the table. Only the teacher is allowed to put the ink onto the inking tray. So if you run out of ink on your inking tray, if it starts to get kind of gray when you're rolling it onto your stamp, it's not very thick, you can ask me and I will come and put a dot of ink onto your tray. And then what you're going to do is you're going to use the roller that has the rainbow tape. Make sure that only the rainbow tape roller is the one that touches the ink. And you're going to roll that ink front to back. And then you're also going to roll that ink side to side. So our goal is to get a nice smooth layer of ink, because you want the same amount of ink all the way across your styrofoam stamp. Once you've got a smooth amount of ink, and you can see right there, that's a nice smooth amount all the way across, then you can go ahead and roll that ink onto your stamp. And I'm making sure to get ink all the way to the corners and the edges. Like I can see that corner right there is a little bit light gray because it doesn't have as much ink on it. So I'm just going to get more ink there. You want the ink to be even all the way across. And I can tell that I did a really good job of carving my design, because all of my lines are showing through white. That means that those carved lines are deep enough that the ink can't touch them. So when you're done inking your styrofoam plate, you're going to move to wiping off your hands with a wipey. So you're definitely going to get a little ink on your fingers during the process of inking it. If you can wipe off your fingers real quick before the next step, that'll make your life a lot easier. Now that I have my stamp inked, I'm ready to start printing onto my paper. And for the first step, I want to make sure and do this away from my stamp. So I'm going to move this out of the way. I've got my name on the back of my paper, and on the front of my paper I'm going to take a spray bottle, and this is a spray bottle that just puts out like very, very fine mist, so it shouldn't get the paper too wet. I'm going to hold it about a foot apart. You don't want it to be really close because then you're going to get drips. Hold it about a foot apart and just spray 3 or 4 times, and you'll get like just teeny tiny little water droplets all over your paper. That little amount of water is going to help our stamp to show up better, right? So now that I have paper that is a little bit wet, I can go ahead and start stamping my artwork. So I'm turning my stamp over and I'm looking for that dot. Remember, that dot is always going to be pointing towards the middle of my paper. And I'm going to line up my stamp just on the edge, because once it touches the paper, I can't move it. So I'm going to start off by just lining it up on the edge of my paper, and then once it's lined up, I can fold it down. I'm going to use the roller that does not have any tape on it. So this roller is used for the back of the stamp. It's not used to roll ink. And then I'm going to carefully roll my stamp, making sure to get the edges and the corners, and also holding that stamp still because we don't want it to move. And then I'm ready to peel off. Once it's completely rolled, I'm just going to peel off that stamp, and I have a beautiful image. And remember, we're not trying to make a completely perfect image, right? We want this to look like it was artwork made by human hands. The goal is not to make a perfect piece of art that like is printed off of a computer. So if there are little spaces that are a little bit lighter, or if you can see a fingerprint, that's kind of the beauty of printmaking. I'm going to speed up the video for this next part and just kind of show you what it looks like to add the other 3 pieces to a radial print. Remember, I want you to look for how I always put this dot in the middle. So as you watch these next few steps sped up, pay close attention to how I'm changing the position of my stamp. So you can see that I am finished with my first try at my radial printmaking. I took my styrofoam to the sink and I just washed it off with water, and I just used my fingers to very gently wash all of that ink away. You get to decide if you want to take your styrofoam home at the end of the day. Another thing you can do with it is use it again to make another print. So if your first try ended up kind of weird, or you don't like how it turned out, maybe it didn't have enough water on the paper, maybe you had too much water on the paper, one of the great things about printmaking is that you can always do it again, right? This is a design that you worked really hard to create on this stamp, and now you can use that design again and again and again multiple times. If you do want to use this stamp again in class today, you're gonna need to get a paper towel and you're gonna need to dry it off completely. If you have any water on the styrofoam, it's gonna mess up when you roll the ink onto it. So enjoy. You might have time to make about 2 or 3 versions of this artwork, and I hope you have fun printmaking.